I think there are lessons learned by each of the countries who have witnessed what's happened in the last 6 to 9 months, and I think India should also see how it can improve. Indian corporates have massively underinvested in R&D. All of us, and rightly so, were looking at China plus one as one of the big anchors that we were getting into. I mean, if you look at the trade deficit that US and China have, it's more than $200 billion. The government doesn't like to deal with specific issues. They want to deal much more with industry-related issues that they want to solve.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Idea Exchange. We have the honor of hosting Mr. Rajiv Memani. He's the EY India Chairman and Regional Managing Partner for Africa India Super Region. He's also the chair of the EY Global Growth Markets Council. Beyond EY, Mr. Memani currently is holding a very important position in the Indian industry. He is serving as the president of the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, which is India's foremost industry chamber. Over the years, he's also been a part of various policy advisory committees constituted by the Government of India, including the task force that submitted the first draft of the simplified direct tax law in 2019. By qualification, Mr. Memani is a chartered accountant, and he also has a degree in commerce from the prestigious Shriram College of Commerce. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us for this interaction. We have senior colleagues and editors here.
Thank you. Looking forward.
And it's great to have a voice from the industry, considering this interesting period that we're going through, thanks to the current occupant of the White House. Right? So, I'll get straight into it. As the head of CII, I want to first ask you, how concerned is the industry about the Trump administration's tariff tantrums and the likely impact of the high tariffs imposed on India? And how would you rate the Indian government's response so far to whatever has been happening over the past few months?
So I would say when you look at industry at a broader level, there is a concern in the industry, definitely, because India has been and US have enjoyed very strong bilateral economic relationships. So there is some concern that is there. I think especially in those pockets that are directly impacted, the concern, as you can imagine, will be there. Those companies that were exporting substantially to the US, and some of them were labor-intensive organizations. I think there the concern is probably higher because it directly impacts them. But I do believe that the noise around it is probably disproportionate to the economic impact. So I think the industry by and large feels that it is something that shouldn't have happened, and I think the economy was and has been the fastest growing economy globally for the last many years, and in the near term future at least it should be. So to that extent, yes, this has become kind of a rallying force, topical thing, and people are looking at it. Also, I would say at the same time, there is a large section of industry which is viewing this as a tremendous opportunity for India to look at the next generation of changes. What can it do to ensure that things that probably should have been addressed earlier that have not been addressed, to enhance India's competitiveness in India's and also those areas of growth opportunities that have not been fixed. Now, a lot of these changes now are not that easy because they involve not one ministry but various ministries. They involve significant state level involvement. So for those things, but they're very critical for India to go to its next level of economic trajectory. And I think this, whether we like it or not, sometimes some of these situations create opportunities which give it the necessary momentum to make those changes. So there is a positivity around that at least there is something that's come, which will give the government and the industry and other stakeholders involved an impetus to make rapid change, which makes India much more competitive, and also opens greater economic opportunity in India. So I think that way there is obviously an element of this specifically to those who are directly impacted, which is challenging. But there is also a equally strong element that this can give us a good impetus to, sometimes to jump ahead you have to maybe move one step back. I think that gives you that impetus to do that. Your other question was what has been what we think is government. I think government's response has been very reasonable. From whatever I understand, the government put its best foot forward as soon as we had the new US president come in. I think the Indian Prime Minister was amongst the first ones to go and visit. There was a group that was set up which engaged extensively with industry to gauge industry's feedback on what was there, and that was done at a very rapid pace, and also it was very detailed, significant engagement. I think the government made several trips to ensure that the trade arrangement is reached, which is fair, reasonable to both the parties concerned, has to be win-win. And from whatever I understand, I think most of the issues, there were no long pending issues. There were some areas which were no-go areas for US, and there were some areas which were no-go areas for India, which as they saw, as they mentioned, they drew the red lines on that. But outside of that, from whatever I understand, I think yes, you always try and ensure that you get the best deal for your country, and I'm sure that's true for on both sides. So there is some level of discussion, negotiation involved, but there is so much of complementarity in the relationship between India and US that I think a lot of the tariff structure that was set up in India was not meant for the Western world. So I think to that extent, reducing duties and others probably won't have been a challenge for India. And after that also, I think they've not been India has not made any sort of reciprocal responses. It's been measured in its response, and I think the behavior of Indian political leadership is what one would expect from a large one of the largest democracies in the world, one of the fastest growing economies. I think country to country respect, irrespective of size and stature, has to be there. And I think it's very important in the medium term to long term that India maintains its stature of being free, fair, independent in their thought process.
But sir, given how mercurial the Trump administration has been of late, and how they seem to have, thrown the conventional diplomatic playbook out the window completely, what is it in the current scenario that the government and the industry can do to mitigate this crisis beyond beyond the positioning that we've already done from the government side?
No, I think yeah, I think whatever has to be done is being done. I think there are sort of ongoing discussions on trade, on some of the outstanding issues that are pending. From India's side, I think it's probably business as usual whenever we are dealing with the US companies or the US government or anything else. And I think the real thing is you have to use this as an opportunity to strengthen yourself. I think there are lessons learned by each of the countries who have witnessed what's happened in the last 6 to 9 months, and I think India should also see how it can improve. I think what's become clear is that economic size is important, but equally important is what your vulnerabilities are. And I think how India addresses that, whether it's in terms of supply chain, whether it's in terms of creating diversified markets, whether it's building the strength and competitiveness of its own economy. I think these are things that India needs to address with even greater vigor and urgency. And I think that's what we should focus on. Sometimes I feel that if the entire conversation is too centered around how will the other party react, I think we will miss the opportunity of using this as a place to really strengthen ourselves.
Right. Um, and again, just keeping on this subject, the Trump administration has trained its guns on India, particularly with regard to our Russian oil imports, right? If you look at the savings we make as a country by buying cheaper Russian oil, uh, the likely impact on India's exports to the US due to higher tariffs would probably far outweigh the savings that we're making, right? In that context, what do you think? Would it be better to just cut down on those imports, placate Washington, and get a lower tariff, at least get the 25% additional tariff off our backs? Or is the question a deeper one that goes beyond just these mathematical calculations? Because at one level, do we want a foreign capital to dictate whom we should be doing business with? I just wanted to get your view on that.
See, I don't know whether uh, uh, Russian oil is the issue or there are other issues, and in some ways, is this the facade? So it's very difficult to say what the issue is. Uh, if there was such a big issue, I'm sure it could have been bilaterally solved, uh, and one could have arrived at a win-win relationship. There are many other countries, as you know, who are also importing either Russian oil or gas and everything. So India is not the outlier here. There are many other protagonists in this. So I don't think that is the issue, but I do believe that under normal circumstances, any country should have the right to say what they are acquiring, what they are procuring, from whom they are doing it. And if something has to be banned or completely restricted for reasons that are acceptable, then I think that should apply to everyone. That should not just apply to one country or two countries, then that should apply to everyone. That's something, if there's global or a significant global understanding on restricting something, then I think that should be applicable to everyone who's involved in this.
You have a ringside view of what's happening from the industry side. In terms of your discussions with the government as CII, is there something that you've already sort of proposed to them as to how to deal with this situation? Any specific sectors within the larger CII ambit who have specific concerns that who are most likely to get affected the most due to these tariffs? Uh, in terms of those specific demands, if you could, shed some light on what kind of consultations you've been having.
So there are two in CII's conversations with the government, and also what our members have been saying. You can break the sort of engagement into two parts. One is, as I said, those sectors which are really impacted by this. They are obviously seeking some relief, and I think there are conversations around that. The second is outside of the sectors that are impacted, the government and led by the Prime Minister himself are very keen to use this as an opportunity to bring in changes in India, which haven't happened, should have happened earlier, haven't happened, and always there is a lot of scope to improve. I think there is a lot of engagement in that as well, to say what those issues are, what those areas are. I think that also is there. On the first one, I would say that the delta is so high. So with 50% tariff, competitively, if you were to compare it with other countries that India competes with, is 30 to 35%. So any normal relief measure honestly won't work. So yes, we have represented to the government, but I think government also believes that normal relief measures, even if you were to provide a 5% subsidy, 10% subsidy, it will not be enough. So I think what our obviously every industry group has made that, but what we have also told especially on the financing side and on the to the Reserve Bank that when you look at in particularly those industries that are impacted, similar to what happened during COVID, when you're looking at non-provision, or when you're issuing when the banks have to issue an alert, I think there the changes that were made, extending that to a period of 6 months or extending the alert period to 90 days, we have sought that specific relief. Also, outstanding dues that are there from various PSUs, other government agencies, if those dues can be accelerated so that working capital blockages can be taken care of. And also where you have issues around inverted duty structures and others, those which can be addressed, should be addressed. Obviously, there's been an ask to provide a direct straight subsidy, into some sectors. But I think greater focus, you also have to try and engage with the government in areas where they also are more receptive to change. I think there, I would think solvency. I think general belief is that this too shall pass. I mean, I think it's unsustainable to have this kind of tariff. So over a period of time, when that is, one doesn't know. But it's very important that organizations remain solvent till that point in time. So whatever that can enable solvency, especially for MSMEs, and also relief that's required for the number of people that they employ, I think that part is taken care of. And the second is government also works with industry to see how we can diversify markets. So building new relationships, accelerating the trade agreement with EU, accelerating what has been signed to get it very quickly implemented with UK. Look at other trade diversification that can happen, and supporting in the marketing activity in whatever else is required. So I think those are the areas where obviously there is a big list of what we want, but our sense is that around those areas we'll probably see greater activity.
But these all are mostly slightly longer gestation projects.
No, the
right?
first one is
the first one, not the first one.
Yeah,
but
I think the trade diversification is a longer gestation period, but you have to start somewhere. Obviously, this really creates it gives a sense of urgency on this. And yes, definitely to in some raw materials, in textiles and garments, there are inverted duty structures. Some raw materials are more expensive in India, so imports have been made duty free. I'm talking of man-made fibers, cotton. Then if some RODTEP and if those benefits can be extended, as I said, specific relief that can be provided as a clear incentive. We've made that, I think CII has made that request to government, I think some of which government is actively working on, and some, my guess is they'll also feel that what's the greatest bang for the buck, and where can they get it.
Okay, sir. So now we can probably go to the audience, throw the floor open.
Sorry. So one of the limitations that the government has cited on its end is that, one, we don't know how long this will continue, and second, that the tariff impact cannot be sort of mitigated in any manner. The 50% tariff. So that is one constraining factor that they've cited.
Okay.
The other problem that is generally felt is that a lot of the restrictions that are there are primarily because the large industrial houses have sort of lobbied and got certain things done, QCOs for instance. The problem with these tariffs is that somehow it seems to be hurting the smaller exporters much more than bigger companies. So there is a bit of a trade-off in terms of the reforms that we expect the government to do, but the lobbying power that the big industry houses have versus the impact that perhaps the smaller guys feel. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think QCOs is a big versus small debate. I think if you actually see QCOs has helped India also open up some sectors. QCOs basically came into being when a lot of, and particularly I would say MSMEs, went to government to say that they've been rendered uncompetitive because there is cheap substandard quality material that's coming from different parts of the world in India, which does not have the same quality bearing, or for whatever reason, because of subsidies or other things, they're pushed into India, which was much cheaper. I think that was the genesis through which QCO came. And I think I would say in some industries it did play an active role. So if you meet a lot of MSMEs, a lot of them will also tell you that they benefited immensely from QCO. I would say the challenge in QCO later on was that QCO was imposed on products where maybe India either did not have adequate production capacity, or in many cases zero production capacity. So that created a lot of challenges for the MSMEs or for the larger companies, because neither could they import, or if they imported, they had to import from destinations where it was very, very expensive, and there was no domestic capacity that was available. I think that is something that has been presented to the government to say that when they look at QCOs, they should do an economic impact assessment to say, if you are applying QCOs, then those QCOs should only be applied where you have it doesn't it doesn't impact the overall manufacturing of the finished products, and particularly when raw materials and those raw materials that get into exports and everything else. I think now the government has set up interministerial committees, so I would say the QCOs will go through a more detailed review. Also, there were issues on labs being available for testing, international testing, whether it's accepted in India, standards of India versus standards outside, quality standards outside. India was keen to have their own quality standards, and to the extent that they were very consistent with the global standards, I think that was fine. So I think those were the issues that were there. I don't think QCOs was so much big versus small. There could have been one-off cases like that, but largely it was meant for, I would say, really protecting the MSMEs from cheap products, substandard quality products coming, whether it could be shoes, could be anything else, many things, raw material products that were coming from different parts of this thing. But I think now QCOs is in the, the framework has been set up, there will be, and it's a divided house. A lot of people feel that QCOs, have impacted the exports, have impacted our competitiveness. There are a lot of people feel also that QCOs has helped them, set up manufacturing in India and ensure that even products that are coming from outside have registration that is there. And where the engagement of industry and government is very good in this, in whichever sector segments, I think resolution in some cases happens pretty quickly. When I say quickly, in 2 to 3 months' time, things get resolved.
How important is it, or what kind of an opportunity do we have at this point in time to perhaps look at maybe branding of Indian products and services, which we've perhaps not really focused on now at this point in time? The difference with China and India is the fact that they sell things that other countries need, but they also have these, these products that are identifiable. Maybe consumers ask for it. It's difficult to replace it with Indian products. Largely, there seems to be an issue. Is this an opportunity?
Sorry, I didn't understand the second part of the question.
The fact that a lot of the Chinese products, have brands behind it. Consumers would typically tend to ask for those brands. For instance, if a TikTok goes off in a market, the absence of that app is felt by consumers directly. There could be a call to get it back on, but with Indian products, a lot of it is back-end stuff, non-branded. Is that a constraint? Is that something being felt or seen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this entire thing of being a product economy brand, I think what India, I think there are 2-3 elements to it. First is Indian corporates have massively underinvested in R&D. I think if you look at the percentages, it's 0.6, 0.7%. And if you were to compare that with averages around the world, and specifically countries that are having outsized growth, that number is 3 to 4%. So the reason I'm starting with research is the product also has to be right for the brand to be fully established. I think that is something that the government, they've launched a new R&D scheme. They're trying to nudge private sector, but I think the onus also is with private sector to try and see how we can invest more on the R&D side. And I think if India has to be competitive, that has to be amongst the top priorities from what industry can do. Secondly, if you facilitate that through industry academia partnerships, which is also not happening as effectively as happening outside. So how do you unlock that is very important. And I think if you ask academia, the blame will lie with industry. If you ask industry, blame lies with academia. And there are many reasons on what are the motivations of academia to actually collaborate as compared to other countries. When do you become an assistant professor? What are the things that you are required to when you become a professor? Is engagement with industry a critical component to that or not? So it's a complex subject, but I think it's really unfortunate that India is not able to use that, and that's something that we should be doing. The third is, and I would say both in terms of products and also in areas like tourism, India has woefully underinvested in its brand. I mean, from what I believe in tourism, I don't know the exact numbers, from a budget of at some stage which was about $50 million, it's now being brought down to $3 million. And I think tourism has an amazing multiplier impact on economy, all of us know that. But investing there, investing in trying to both subtly and industry and government in partnership to try and say, what does brand India stand for? And is it always, brand India will always be standing for low cost, or brand India will also be standing for high quality? And in many products we have changed. There are for the country and economy of our size, if you're saying we're the fourth largest, fifth largest economy in the world, the number of global brands that we have which are fully respected or which are accepted outside is less. So I think the responsibility lies both with government in how they help in propagating the brand through concentrated investments through our embassies, trade offices, ministry. But equally the onus lies with industry to say the challenge or the opportunity that we have had is the growth in India has been so strong that many of us have largely learned that if you are very focused on India for growth, it will give you the best financial result. The second thing is the capital allocation model has been such that the capital allocation seems to be more effective for many of us to invest in different segments of the Indian economy rather than picking up one or two sectors and trying to see how you can make that global. You have examples like Bharti Airtel that's done that. You have an example like Sun Pharma that has done that. You have an example like Indigo that has done that. And I think these companies in 3 to 5 years' time, some of them have become global, but they will become much more global, visible, stronger names. I mean, Tata's obviously has been a strong global name. But many of us have actually invested massively in, there's nothing wrong in that, but just have massively invested in India to ensure that they get get the maximum bang for the buck in India. And that's why the ROEs, growth, in India and for Indian companies have delivered in terms of financial results has been huge. And that's one of the reasons why India enjoys one of the highest PE multiples that any market enjoys. If you compare India and China and you compare the difference in multiples in that market, if you look at growth in sales and if you look at return on equity, the metric will be clear. If you look at global presence, growth in sales, and growth in sales being reflected in R&D, brand, intellectual property, and you look at return on equity, and when I say growth in sales, I'm talking of global sales. I think the answer will be very clear. I think corporate India has been and partly because probably what happened in 2007, 2008, when many Indian companies went outside, what happened in 2012, 13. I think there is an element of caution. You had a new act that came in where massive rights were shifted to the creditors, as they should, and that brought in a financial discipline cadence that Indian companies have been following. But I think now, as some Indian companies grow, I think how we create an impact outside, and I'm pretty certain that will happen in a 3-year time frame. But I think what has to be more deliberate has to be how do we invest more in R&D.
Hari sir.
Hi, sir. So, Prime Minister has announced to bring in next generation reforms and has formed a committee. So, from the industry side, can you help us to understand which are the much needed reforms in agriculture sectors which the government should bring in short term and medium terms in agriculture sector?
Okay. So I may not be knowing and be fully knowledgeable on the agricultural sector. I can tell you some of the ones that I'm aware of. I mean, overall, I would say the way the government is looking at reforms is in two or three buckets. First is those reforms which will enable ease of doing business. The second bucket of reforms is what I would say more factor reforms, which reduces the cost of doing business. So whether it's on land, labor, power cost, logistics cost, and there's a lot of granular work that's happening there. And third is the industry unlocks that are there, that those industries where you can create greater value added in India, or those sectors which are not fully exploited right now, you look at that. So greater value addition in areas like energy, power, some parts of manufacturing, mining. There are great opportunities to grow, and how that can be grown. On coming back to your point, and I'm happy to get through in any of them in details if you would want to. On agriculture, I think the agricultural reforms that the bill that was being produced, I think that had some very positive changes. And unfortunately, the government tried to push it, but it couldn't get through. I think that has put us back. So I think some of the asks that were there, I think if those asks were processed maybe on an individual basis, they will get to a lot of relief. But I would say one of them which the government is really looking at to say, how do you strengthen FPOs? Because that is one of the ways which is enabling collective buying in agriculture is through FPOs. So how do you strengthen the entire FPOs? I think that is one piece that is being looked at a lot from whether it's in terms of procurement, whether it's in terms of technology enablement and everything else. I think FPOs is one area which I know is a big thing. The second is around fertilizer. India's imports of fertilizer are continuing to grow, whether it's in urea, whether it's in NPK, whether it's others. So how can we get greater manufacturing in India? What are the things that we can do to ensure that better negotiations, how do you either provide direct subsidies to farmers, give them the choice whether they want urea, NPK, others, and also encourage balanced usage of other fertilizers also. So those are the areas that on agriculture that is there. There is obviously availability. The third area is availability of creating a digital stack where for farmers the data on monsoons, on weather conditions, on soil usage is easily available, and they can access it freely. So that and it is localized, and it can be localized today to where you're where you're doing the agricultural activity. If that can be done, that can create a lot of this thing. And then what became the other issue was how do you diversify from to other crops, and how does one deal with that? I think that's an issue that as I said, under the new farm bill or the farm bill that got stalled, I think those areas were there.
Just a couple of quick questions. One, just going back to the global volatility, is this something which the government or the industry, Indian industry, could have sort of predicted given what had happened in the first Trump administration, where, I mean, admittedly the focus is more on China and the semiconductor industry and China's access to it, but the signs of protectionism had already emerged back then. Second, I think the last time we had met was in early July when you had said that the cost of capital has come down and the RBI has done its job. But what you've seen since then is due to a variety of factors, including the fact that the government's proposed GST reforms has led to some fears of fiscal slippage. Bond yields have gone up. Banks have started increasing their lending rates, even for homes. does monetary policy, does the RBI need to do more now, given the situation? Thanks.
Both your questions actually are contradictory. You're talking of global policy volatility and you're saying RBI needs to do more. But anyway, I'll if I forget, just remind me. I'll just have. See, for government to predict global volatility, I think most government had predicted global volatility. I think there was, if you look at one of the reasons why RBI's stance was what it was for a long time, was that because it was because of geopolitical tensions, conflicts around the world, what AI is doing, what's happening on climate, and obviously, general changing of the globalization narrative that was happening. And I think most people were expecting that. But I would say that all of us, and rightly so, were looking at China plus one as one of the big anchors that we were getting into. I mean, if you look at the trade deficit that US and China have, it's more than $200 billion, and it's a very sticky trade deficit because the reliance on some of the Chinese products, and if you actually look at China's share in the US trade, it's actually come down, but the number continues to move up. And I think so they have diversified also, and most countries, when they look at it, they will realize the dependence on one country has been very high, and therefore everyone thought that countries would like to diversify their risks a bit more, and therefore whilst all of this was there, India was seen to be one of the beneficiaries of that, primarily because of the relationships that India has enjoyed with all these countries, stability in government, strong trade ties, strong political ties, and also competitiveness in manufacturing and everything else. So I don't think that, and historically the earlier Trump administration and the relationships between both sides were very strong. And the feeling gradually has been in India and in the US is that it's not only the leadership, but down the line, it has become a very strategic partnership. So it's not just the leadership, but also right through. There are lots of dialogues that are going, and we are seen as natural partners. And if you look at various comments that President Biden also made, it talked about being the most significant relationship of this century and so on and so forth. So I don't think that was really, I won't blame the government for not having foreseen this. I think if you honestly ask me, even till a month back, everyone thought 45 days back, that this is something that will happen, and India will probably have a very reasonable trade agreement. I think everyone understands the US concern that you have mounting trade deficit, not sustainable. You have tariff structures which are not reciprocal, even if you say it's not the right word, but which are sort of, the delta is very huge. So everyone understood that issue, and everyone was trying to see how you figure that out. And US has, or other markets have, wanting to build more supply chains within, which is also understandable. But still, one felt there was enough opportunity playing space within that for countries like India. So I don't think that I would hold the government out for that. But again, I would say that I still feel it's things will, play out as they will. I mean, I think, but sometimes these events also happen and create opportunities. And I think our focus also has to be much more on trying to say what are the reforms, what are the opportunities, how do you galvanize industry, how do you galvanize more investments during this process, how do you attract FDI, how do we make it more attractive for industry to invest. That has to be the focus right now, and then the economic momentum will catch up. As it is now very clear in the new global order that global economic strength and economic resilience matters a lot, and I think India should be very focused on building that more and more. This has been, but I think more and more, especially on the resilience side. On the interests, I think the RBI probably did a very bold move, which was not expected by anyone. So it was very positive. And I think they're also ensuring that there is good transmission effect of that. And I think there has been a good transmission effect in that. Whether GST will cause, we'll have to see. Inflation is still under control. Lower GST rates will lead to, will also, at one sense, some of the fiscal deficit may go up, but we still don't know what the rates are, final rates are. We still don't know how compensation cess will be dealt with fully. What is the impact of that? And what could be the potential GDP impact of that? So I personally don't feel that the impact of GST rate reduction or the modification that the government has done, which is very significant, that the impact on tax collection overall will be that significant. I can't give you a number today, but I think if I look at the rough and don't quote me, don't hold me to that, but if I look at rough and ready number, maybe for the first year, if we are able to pass this reform, say by end of September, I think the impact could be in the 40,000-50,000 crore kind of range. But the lift in the GDP impact could be, annual GDP impact could be roughly about 0.5%. But it all depends on what the final rate structure is, how they deal with compensation cess and everything. So I would say that's a very positive move from on the interest rate. Whether RBI should be, I would say in this kind of environment, the RBI also, it's when you're dealing with very volatile environment, strong balance sheet is very important. And I think RBI is very, I would say they are very aware of what's happening. They've seen, right now they will ensure that transmission impact is happening, credit availability is there. Again, there is, various schemes that the government has launched, but particularly to support MSMEs. Whether it's the credit guarantee or taking away of the personal guarantee schemes, credit guarantees, that actually start playing out, and also getting more capital in the banking system. I would say I think that is something that will be playing out. We'll have to still watch out for how inflation behaves over the next 2 to 3 years, the next 2 to 3 months, to say whether any further reduction will be there or not. But volatility would mean that you would want a stronger balance sheet.
Sir, we are talking about export diversification, but we have seen that the countries with which India has FTAs, the industry has not been able to take full advantage of it. So why is it so, and what the industry bodies like CII is doing to basically disseminate the information with the smaller units so that they are aware of these benefits are available?
No, I think. Yeah.
And second thing about the GST rate cuts, so there are concerns that the industry should pass on the benefit to consumers, not profiteer from it. So what the industry body like CII will do basically to see that this actually happens?
Yeah. So on the trade FTAs, whether they've been effective or not, I think they were the FTAs that were done earlier, which India did earlier, where I think there has been the impact of those FTAs has not been positive from an India standpoint. But the FTAs that have happened recently, and particularly when you look at UK, Australia, and others, I think we feel reasonably positive that the impact to both sides will be positive. I think they're focused on taking the controversial pieces out, focus on a few win-wins, seeing how they can create those win-win scenarios, and then see how we move forward. And as and when EFTA has another interesting element of investments of roughly $100 billion, which are new investments. So these are not market investments, these are not secondary investments, these are investments that will grow into creating new assets. And I think there are stringent clauses. If those investments don't happen, the duty benefits can be revoked. So I think some of the new trade agreements that India has signed actually have been quite positive. And what CII has been doing is, one is obviously taking a lot of delegations to the respective countries to see how these trade relationships happen, and also through our various regions talking about what each of the FTAs are doing. So one is to ensure that there is more bilateral to bilateral relationship that is built, and the second aspect of that is also how do you communicate that these are some of the changes that are happening. CII in partnership with Ministry of Commerce are doing a lot of these sessions. In particular, I would say trade delegations board coming in and out and creating the awareness. On the GST, no, I think it's a genuine concern. I think we have been, as and when things come, I think we will be definitely, as part of the code of ethic that you would expect from any CII member, I think passing this, ensuring that this benefit is passed, is very important. I think what CII has realized, and it's an important part, that trust is very important. If you want to look at ease of doing business, if you're looking at long-term success for the country, for business, the trust between industry to industry, trust between industry and government and industry and various stakeholders is very important. And I think that's something that we're talking a lot about. And I feel that this is an important component of that. Until now, I don't know whether the legislation that was introduced when GST was introduced, whether they will do that or not, whether the government will bring that or not to look at the anti-profiteering clauses. But I think the pricing and how this translates into pricing will be very important. Having said that, the only thing I would do is the government will have to solve for the inverted duty structure. But what may happen is that you may reduce the rate, but if my credit cost, if my credit is in, suppose the rate is reduced to 5%, but if my credit is 11 to 12%, then it's just block credit. So how industry and government work to correct the inverted duty structures is very important. And because of some of the duties that are not subsumed, and because of the fact that when you're doing Capex, your ability to utilize some of these credits takes a long time, I think resolution of the inverted duty structures and block credit and how we resolve that is important.
Yes, sir. Staying on GST, I'd just like to come in here. Obviously, the government is working on rate rationalization, providing benefit to the industry and thereby, in turn, to consumers. The new tax regime was also sweetened, putting more money in the hands of the salaried employees. For a while now, the government has been voicing this concern about private Capex not picking up, right? And the government having to do all the heavy lifting, which now they want to pass the baton on to the private sector. Do you see these changes or reforms in income tax and what we are seeing in GST now? Do you see that addressing the demand side of things? Could it in turn lead to private investment, private capital expenditure picking up in India?
Yeah, no, I think it will definitely do. I think this should, as I said, at least in our estimate, this should have a 0.5% impact on GDP. So definitely capacity utilization gets better, and that will increase Capex. Having said that, there are 2-3 things. One is there is no concrete number to suggest has private Capex slowed down. So if you look at a report which was, I think, if I remember correctly, ICICI Securities did a report of all listed companies in India, and when they looked at their balance sheet, I think private Capex in 24-25 had grown by almost 20% or so. It was 11 trillion, and it is probably after 2011, it was the highest Capex that India has done. So I would say that it's not that private Capex is not happening, but if you actually read some of the reports and you look at these numbers in more granular detail, private Capex is happening. I definitely do foresee that, because of all the volatility that's happening and distraction that is there in business right now, some of it may slow down. But if we do the things that we are talking about in terms of reforms, where ease of doing business, suppose if you start a project, it doesn't take you 6 to 9 months to get a piece of land, then 6 months to get environmental clearances, then 3 months to get forestry clearances. I'm just sort of adding up, and then getting NOCs, then, or if you want to create a hospital, you have to get 70 approvals. If you have to create a hotel, you have to get 50. If some of them can be crunched down, and then I would say that is also very important to get the Capex momentum going, and also reducing the costs and simplification. I think the one element of GST which is really good, which is honestly, we didn't expect that the government will go and do what they've done, which is really very encouraging. But also the other pieces that are equally important, which is in terms of number of audits that are done, the manner in which the audits are done, block credits, and how do you deal with decriminalization. I mean, if there is some mistake of 1 crore in some computational error, or you misclassification or ITC that you have not input tax rate that you have not taken, you can have prosecution for a year. And if it's 5 crores, you can have prosecution for 3 years. I mean, those are things where we should just have compounding, where or you're saying that the onus to prove that you are not guilty lies with the SSC and not with the department. I mean, I think those kind of things, the amount of energy that they take away is huge. So as we look at, I mean, in summary, private capex has been happening. The potential to do more is much greater. GST is one leg of the stool. It will definitely enable better capacity utilization, greater sales, and therefore greater economic impetus to do it. But equally important is the other factors that need to be simplified. And there are lots of new opportunities that India can look at. I mean, we have one of the largest coal reserves. If you look at India and if you compare that with China, China is aggressively moving into coal to gas. They have 4 times the capacity on coal to gas. If India was to open up coal to gas, give some of the blocks that are there, some blocks that are with PSUs or some blocks that are with state, push coal to gas, your import bill, and technically your import bill on fuel and energy could come down by $30 to $50 billion or even more. So, there are many, we are sitting in, for example, iron ore, we are sitting in the largest deposit of iron ore. Can we push the steel industry? You can have significant exports in the steel. A lot of those iron ore deposits are lying with states or are lying with PSUs, and there are various other minerals and others. You can just unlock manufacturing activity, economic activity, capex that goes up. The entire distribution sector. Why should, I mean, there's enough evidence to say that please privatize it. If you can't provide, give the second license in a state. Let the state, let the private sector come and look at distribution, reduce the T&D losses, make the industry more competitive in terms of power costs. Right now, there's so much of cross subsidies that are there in power. So I think there are many areas in which some of this can happen, and I think the good thing is the government is listening. Industry and chambers of commerce like CII are going and providing, giving the inputs from the industry, looking at not only the problem but also very importantly what the solution is, what the economic impact is, and what are the ways in which the solution can be arrived at, because these are not easy solutions, these are complex ones. So.
Agam?
Yeah, hi. I have 2-3 questions.
Yeah.
One is that there is a view that India's economic policy is decided keeping in mind the interests of a few billionaires. Like a few former Trump officials have also said that. Given that you represent CEI, do you think that's true or not true? And how diverse is the CEI in terms of representing industry interests?
No. So CI is very diverse. And it has a very large MSME category. And the MSME voice, any representation that we make, the MSME voice is most heard. So even if you look at the last set of articles that have come, we have said even if you have to provide GST simplification, at least ensure that it gets done on the MSME side. On reacting to what US is saying, everything, these are negotiations that are going on. And if you actually compare them with facts, I think they are far away from facts. I think we should take a lot of pride in the success of some of the companies. You need big companies. You need companies that can execute on the ground. You want large capex at one hand. So when you want large capex, you have to unleash some of the companies, larger companies, and they can create greater economic value chains than there. So I don't think CI has anything against the larger companies or against the larger conglomerates that are there. I think they're doing a stellar job in terms of economic activity. But as a chamber of commerce, I think we are very focused to ensure that actually those groups need lesser support. The support that is required from a chamber of commerce is much more from MSMEs who find it difficult to get their voice heard with the government. And also from a government, they know that, for example, if a new FTA has come or something has come, the larger companies will figure it out pretty quickly. Even how do you navigate this tariff situation? If you honestly ask me, the larger companies will figure it out to say how do they navigate the tariff situation, where can they create more value add, how they can shift manufacturing and everything else. But it's the MSMEs who need the support. So both from a government standpoint and from an industry standpoint, one of the critical things for chambers of commerce like CII is to really encourage MSMEs. Even if we look at the trade groups or the trade delegations that are going out, 90% of that is MSMEs.
Right. Just two more questions. So we've seen that because of tensions with the US, the Indian government is sort of cozying up to the Chinese. We don't know how that will play out, but keeping aside the national security concerns, which obviously the government will decide on, and industry has to follow. Does the industry have an independent view on how India should deal with China?
Yeah, I think generally I would say one area where industry is very keen that India engages with China is on if we have to look at building the supply chain for manufacturing in areas around EV, electronics, components. For example, the new component policy that's come out right now. For India to get technology or get the capital goods, it's very important that we have partnerships, joint ventures with Chinese companies. So I by and large, I think Indian industry is keen that those joint ventures, technology tie-ups, visas and freedom to travel is maintained. At the same time, India has a large trade deficit with China. Now, the character of that trade deficits has changed because a lot of that trade deficit is also coming because if India is exporting electronics to in a significant way, then a lot of that, a lot of the components are getting right now imported from China and other places. So the quality of trade deficit is improved, but the number is still there. So yes, you want to ensure that there is if there is dumping that's happening, the anti-dumping agencies or whether you have minimum protection agreements or other areas in which your protection, those protection are there. But if you want to encourage manufacturing, technology transfer, there I think that there is active partnership and capital equipments purchases, because for a lot of these items which India wants to manufacture, actually capital equipments come from China. So for those, I think India industry is very keen that the government has a more proactive stance and a more clearly laid out policy, which is unambiguous in the way we interact with China.
Right. Final question. So there are talks of having an Indian global consultancy firm, right? As someone who's heading the
I said I will not answer any related question. Sorry, I can answer. Sorry, I'm just please. Sorry, global. What was the question?
There is. So do you think there's a need for an Indian global consultancy firm?
No, I think there should. I won't say India whether there is a need or not, but India should definitely aspire to have. And there's nothing wrong in having that aspiration that there should be a high quality firm or a few high quality firms that come from India, which are well known globally. I think it's very similar to the question of brands, that why should India not have some of those brands? So absolutely. But having said that, the global consulting firms or other firms that have been in India, I think they've also contributed significantly to the Indian economy. So I don't think both of these interests run, cross or parallel to each other. I think they are, as there are strong, and India has been a big beneficiary of the consult. If you actually see, for many of the consulting firms, almost 25 to 30% of their global workforce is based in India. Most of them are doing very significant exports from India. A lot of the new AI research innovation that's happening is happening from India. So that's very positive, and I think that's something that the government has been encouraging and hopefully continues to encourage going forward. But at the same time, I think while the government, even the Indians should have the aspiration that there are strong organizations that are built out of India. First, they should be strong in India, be more visible in India, and then after that, we all should have the aspiration of going global.
Hi Rajiv. This is an infrastructure question. Given that EY are strategic partners, strategic advisors for Indian cities and the government, the smart city mission really is a utopian situation, and we all know that our cities are pretty much collapsing. So what do you think is the advice you would give to the government, because governance and funding, these are huge issues with for urban development?
It's a real issue. All I can say, you can write a book on this to say what the government should be doing. But it's a Yeah, it's a real, it's something that the government should really focus on because, and I think the Prime Minister has talked about it, quality of life and ease of life and ease of living and everything else. I think whether it's the master plans, adherence to master plans, uh, you know, building the, clusters, ensuring that if you have metros, I think that government has done a good job, but just the connectivity of citizens with the metros and other things. I think there are all these areas. I mean, you can start from air pollution to water to quality of roads. But I would say the biggest thing is the entire master planning for many of the cities needs to be looked at.
Delhi is the only city that actually has a proper master plan, not all
But
cities.
that master plan is also now pending for change and approval for a long time. And even the where you have in many of the cities where you have slums, ensuring that you have a slum rehabilitation program, it's not that difficult to accomplish. Ensuring that there is space for you allocate land for low cost housing, and that there is how do you ensure that that is done, maintained properly, and how do you allocate land, what land is required for a hotel, what's required for a hospital, what is required for low cost housing. I mean, we have right now 50 categorizations of usage of land, which is unnecessary, but at least 4 or 5 or 6 of these broader categories have to be there to make it better.
Sorry, Shan. Yeah, sorry. Sir, apart from Trump's tariff bombs, with respect to the US, he has pushed for this, industrial interest in cryptocurrencies, and like just removing the sort of blockages that are there for that industry. Do you think that is also something that industry here would be looking at, an industrial sort of participation in cryptocurrencies, investment in those assets, and those as a viable asset? Also backing government reforms to the extent that they can become viable. I mean, they can be viable stable coins, rupee-backed coins, etc.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I haven't heard that from India, but although I have now seen that in Europe, which was very against crypto, in the not too distant future, I think they are passing laws to enable crypto much more in Europe. So I think US is obviously heading in that direction. You have Europe that is going in that direction. I think India has maintained, has not been a big believer in crypto. And I think it'll be interesting to see once it gets done in Europe, how does Indian government look at it. But at this stage, I haven't seen any movement. I think right now we're just seeing the impact on the gaming industry, which we all of us have seen. I think that just going through that now, and I think at some stage, if it becomes acceptable, and knowing the way Indian government will look at it, if they are comfortable that it does not create a long-term economic challenge, whether it in terms of money flowing out, unaccountable wealth, or bubbles that are being created which are not backed by real assets. I think the government will have to be comfortable with that before they pass on. I think the risk appetite of Indian government, and rightly so, in some of these areas is lesser than what you would see in the Western world.
Soumya?
Hi, sir, a couple of questions. One of our key exports to US is now smartphones, and it has been so for a while, with the electronic sector generally becoming like a major source of exports that India does, smartphones, particularly Apple, more so to the US. Of course, right now under the tariff regime, smartphones seem to be excluded, but with the Section 232 review coming up, and of course with Trump's previous sort of comments on Apple's manufacturing base in India, China, elsewhere, how big of a threat is it if the worst case scenario sort of becomes the reality, where say smartphones from India start getting tariffed to the US? Because the PLI here for the smartphones has been one of the most significant sort of production PLIs. What happens to that sort of story? is there an alternate? I mean, are there other geographies? Because US, of course, from a consumer point of view, would be the biggest consumer for smartphones that we make here. What happens to the overall stories, and how can we hedge against sort of that impending risk?
See, right now, from whatever I understand, most of the manufacturers are investing. So I don't see they see that as an immediate risk. And also, it's not that easy to replace some of these supply chains. So once you become deeply entrenched in some supply chains, it's not that easy to just shift. And these are very labor intensive ones. And unlike garments manufacturing or others where capacity can be easily created in other sort of lower cost locations, this one takes time, and also the level of engagement I'm sure that the players have with their respective governments is also significant. So honestly, I don't foresee an immediate threat in that. But once you build a strong competitive base in India, which means much more greater value addition in India, much more manufacturing in India, then automatically the production becomes more competitive. And once that is the case, then other markets and other market opportunities automatically open up. So there are 6 or 7 brands that are there. In fact, some of the large Chinese brands are also manufacturing from India. I'm sure, hopefully, there will be some domestic brands also that will come up, at least in the lower cost categories. There also, I think the manufacturing is happening. So I think our focus has to be on how do you make your manufacturing more competitive. Then you can deal with the world forces. But just being very worried about what happens if this happens and that happens, I think that is neither here nor there. So I think really what industry, what government, and all of us are really focused on in trying to see how do you make that piece more competitive.
Taking forward from what Agam had asked earlier about sort of the thaw in our relationship with China, given that over the last years and specifically from 2020, all the policy interventions that we saw were in a way sort of, abjectly aimed at sort of preventing business from China, be it investments and things like that. A lot of the QCOs came in response to Chinese products flooding the Indian market. Now that we see a potential to sort of open up our economy again to China, and you mentioned the manufacturing sector, which is probably one sector which stands to benefit maybe from like bettering of those ties. Are there other sectors that you see which could also sort of get have benefit from the ties getting better? But also, what are some of the sectors which could be at risk, given that China, in terms of a trading partner, of course we import far more than we export to them. We probably don't even show up in their books when they think of their impactful trading partners, etc. What do we really stand to gain beyond, say, manufacturing? Do the old concerns go away immediately? What do we have to look out for when we sort of start those negotiations with them?
I would say energy transition would be another area where we could benefit significantly. There are in the entire energy piece, I think we could benefit significantly from what's happening in China. What we need to be concerned, I would say, is the same old thing. How do you protect the interest of MSMEs? How do we continue to be vigilant on if there's any dumping that's happening? And I think if there's better dialogue on a G2G basis, then some of these things are not required. Some of these things do come when the dialogue on the government, which happened because of the border concerns at that time. If the G2G relationship is good and there's good understanding, then you can create that into a win-win relationship. And hopefully as the dialogue starts, some of these issues can be addressed. But I would say the biggest concern would be in sectors, either consumer sectors or some of the metal sectors like steel and others, where you just need to ensure that if there is, India has to be competitive, and we should not take the shelter of dumping, but where there is any dumping happening from China or any other country, then I think we should just ensure that we protect the industry. Because if you want capex, if you want investment, you want more domestic value add, then that level of initial protection is very important.
Rajiv, just a couple of questions. One was, in various conversations with government, you get a sense that the industry really hasn't done much in terms of wage growth of its employees over the last 4-5 years. There have been data cited between 2019 and 2023.
where profits have grown, almost 4 times, whereas wage growth has been just 5-6%. This is also being attributed as one of the reasons for, say, post-COVID slow recovery of the economy. Could the economy have grown better with better wages? Is something which the government kind of talks about. And I think this was flagged also, if I'm not wrong, in the CII National Council meetings by the Chief Economic Advisor himself. So what is your view on real income growth of employees by corporate sector? What has been the conversation in the boardrooms? If you can give us a sense of that, then I'll ask the next one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have 2 or 3 different strands of responses here. I think first is for India to grow and become economically strong, the bottom 30% of India has to grow disproportionately. And that income, if that income level does not grow, then for India to be competitive or for demand to come is not going to happen. And there could be potential areas of social unrest and other things that will come up. So I think for any conscious business person and also for for government, I think it's very important in a democracy that continues to see the growth. And whatever in whatever way, in a competitive way that industry can do that, I think we should be doing that. Whether it's through skilling, whether it's through what the minimum wages should be, how do we grow, how do we create opportunities. I mean, there are different ways to address it. The second thing I would say is to compare profit growth and wage growth is comparing apples and oranges. I don't think profit growth and wage growth have any correlation, especially in industries which are commoditized. I mean, you could have a bank which had a profit growth of 30%. It's you cannot have wage growth of 30%. But in some year, as you would see, you would have negative PAT growth in some banks or some technology companies or in some commodity companies. Doesn't mean that the wage growth will be negative. So yes, we had a very strong secular growth post-COVID, but that necessarily will not translate into that kind of wage growth. I think what it should translate into greater economic activity, greater opportunities, therefore greater competitiveness for talent, and then do that. The third thing is you have AI coming, so in a big way, technology shift, AI coming in a big way. And also with the tariffs coming down across the world, there is great pressure on competitiveness. So if you combine all these forces together, I think it's not that easy to say that just do a pump up of the wage growth, because you could have issues around competitiveness. You could have, in many ways, faster displacement using technology. It'll happen. It's a matter of time. I would say, whilst we are all consumed in tariff, I would say a bigger challenge and opportunity for India is actually technology and AI, many folds over than what the tariff issue is. But right now, everyone is distracted by all the words that start with T. But just to round off your question, Very, I think it's I think industry should be much more open in trying to see, when they look at entry costs, if they look at minimum wages and others. I think we should be at a point where we should say that that has to grow faster than what the inflation rate is. And I think you make it up by ensuring, which the industry is doing, you make it up by competitiveness. So you accelerate the return to all stakeholders, including your shareholders, using competitiveness as a lever. But it's very important that there is more balanced growth in wages than what we have seen in the past.
Next question is, recently, one, of course, on online money gaming, the government has completely banned it. So I wanted to check, because the social ethos of a society or traditions of India in the past or current, so those are issues which come, I think, which also kind of a political executive is influenced by, and probably these decisions are taken. Similarly, I think there is a risk aversion, as you said, in cryptocurrencies also, because and these are the most developed countries in the world are kind of slowly adapting to it. So I wanted to get your views on one, how does the industry respond to these issues uh, when traditions, social ethos, etc., come into play in policy making, because these are also growth opportunities for probably employment, for larger wealth creation, etc.
No, I think industry has to be cautious because I think the government, as they've acted, and as we've heard from the various interviews and seen that, obviously they had evidence to suggest that the practices, the push or the attractiveness that was there for people to get in was very, very high. And all kinds of allurements and incentives were given, not by all companies, but by a few companies. The unfortunate problem is that you have a few companies that paint the industry in a particular way, and also some of the algorithms that were being run in the way they were being run and the way people were getting trapped in that. I think the government, to take such an action and such a drastic action, I'm sure they had very definitive awareness and evidence that this is impacting, getting people sucked into this, which will have a long-term negative impact. The youth of this country was, in many cases, was almost using this as a ploy to either earn or spend their time. And I guess as a responsible government, they just took it upon themselves to do it. My guess is the lesson for industry here is that those things which border on that, either you are very disciplined as an industry and your engagement with government is very, very high. Otherwise, that risk factor is there in India. And I think the way, also it's very clear in this government, the way it was executed, they took time, but when they did it, it was like in a flash without many people being even aware of it. So I think, I don't think they, in taking bold action where there's deep conviction, I don't think they're hesitant in doing that.
So, actually, just a follow up to what you said. So, two things seem to be in hindsight when you look at this issue. Two things come to fore. One is whether the industry was doing whatever it was doing in the right manner, so that it doesn't raise issues like these become bigger. Second is the government itself allowing it for so long to happen in a regulatory haze, where there is no, in fact,
whether it's skill or it's
whether it's skill, game of chance, etc. That apart, that is one Supreme Court major issue. But the government itself saying that okay, online money gaming can go on, let me at least get tax out of it. So you have in some sense legitimized the industry for a long time. Foreign capital has come in, so you are sending messages to rest of the world also that you can come in and invest. And then this happens after reaching some kind of a crescendo. So for you to kind of say that industry should be cautious, the industry can you can say it as a CII president, but I will argue say for the industry say you let me let the child grow and then you have just clobbered it.
Yeah. So I think the way, my sense is the way it happened was that I think if the government has a philosophical issue with something, they should nip it in the bud. I think the way the government dealt with this was that, let me create disincentives rather than finding to just nip it in the bud. But when they realized that those disincentives were actually not having any impact, then I think they were left without any choice. So you can argue both ways that what is right and what's not right. And I'm not supporting industry, I'm not supporting government. I'm just, as a bystander, as I'm looking at it, I just feel that they must have had enough evidence to act on this. And you're absolutely right. If I was a company, I should have, first was the tax issue, and they went, it's still hanging in Supreme Court and everything. That okay, this is how the government is planning to penalize me. And you're right, there's a lot of FDI that's come in. There's FDI that's come has come in. A lot of people have actually done very well and made money in this as well. So when you have large stakes involved, whether it's in terms of foreign direct investment, employment, and other things, on hindsight, could the government have acted faster?
So would you as a like CII, would you take up the cost of the industry with the government, or do you think that it's a lost case now, just stay out?
I mean, I don't know the details whether CII is taking or not. It will be difficult for me to say. But I would say in this case, the government stance is very clear. I mean, if you have the leader of the industry saying in some of the newspapers to say that he's, wanting to now in some ways move on and see what are the new, pull out of things and do this. Obviously, he's, I think they are much more knowledgeable in terms of what's happening, what's not happening.
So, in one of the answers in your exchange with Vedi sir, you mentioned that how they probably were preparing in the background, but when this act came, it came very quickly within a matter of days. A lot of people probably weren't even aware of it, whether it was coming or not. From a broader policy-making perspective, how comfortable is the industry with these kind of actions from the government, not specific to real money gaming and this sector, but generally, not many people being aware of it. Suddenly, a bill lands in Parliament. Within 3 days, it's cleared, and an entire sector is brought to its knees. There is no policy predictability.
It depends on the issue. I would say most of the bills, economic bills that are brought in, I think have been discussed. For example, the new income tax bill also was given to the standing committee, and it was discussed. I think it depends on the issue. Some issues are such where if you leave it open for too long, sometimes it's difficult to execute that. But I would say in most of the economic bills, I don't know about others, most of the economic bills that have come, there has been always sufficient room for engagement. On something like GST, you would want it to come faster. You won't want, because at some stage it will start having an impact on demand, and then each state doing their math to say how does this impact them in a positive, negative way. So you really hope that in the flow and in the momentum, people take the calls and move with it. So some things you definitely want to have with speed. But I would say, if I'm just thinking and talking, that most of the economic bills that have come, I think the government has placed it on for consultation. This one, I'm sure, as I said, that when you are taking punitive action and decisive action like this, maybe we just have to move quickly. Demonetization was the other that happened like that. Please don't quote me on that.
So probably just one last question. Again, a broader one. In certain sectors, particularly if you look at auto, if you look at real estate, there seem to be clear signs of a K-shaped recovery in the post-COVID era, right? How concerned is the industry? How concerned is the CII about the urban demand outlook in that context? Is it a matter of concern?
It is definitely a matter of concern, and that's why if you actually even say, I mentioned on the urban development, I did mention that for low cost housing they should have separate land area that's allocated, because otherwise if you were to sell every piece of land on market value basis, then people will build which will give them the highest economic return. So unless you earmark some areas and say, okay, you can only do this, you can, the size of the apartment has to be so much, the maximum value that you can sell is so much, and everything, and then you bid for it. I think that is those are areas where, and the entire GST representation that was happening also, which the industry has made and has been making for the last year or two, is to say that some relief is required in those items which are for mass consumption. And I think that's why the movement from 12 to 5, or in some cases 28 to 18 will happen because of that reason. So I think it's definitely, and I also mentioned, and CI has also mentioned, that unless you don't strengthen the bottom 30% of India, you cannot have a strong economy. So I think that is something that, from a CII standpoint, and it's the entire trust agenda conversation that we continue to have.
Right. And just, just one last question before we close, sir. Over the years, in your experience of working in India, of engaging with the government, now as the head of CII, earlier in various advisory committees and various capacities, how would you view, say, the evolution of the industry's interface and interaction with the government of India? Has it improved? I mean, could you give us a sense of how the industry sort of approaches the government? How comfortable is it? How open is the government to your suggestions? Where is that relationship as of now? Because we've already, saw a major tectonic shift in the Indian polity in 2014 with this new government coming in. Now they are in their third term. It's already been a fairly long time that the BJP, the NDA government is there. And so how has that relationship between the industry and the government evolved?
I would say I think the industry is very clear what the government is looking at. I think the industry is also very clear, and I can say this at least for the central government, that there are no special favors that will be done. And the industry also knows that if they have to do and present something, or if they are unhappy with something, then how do they, unless that has an economic benefit and is the right thing for the country or for a large number of people, it's unlikely. So how do you present your case for change has to be very clearly laid out and very detailed. And the fourth, I would say, is that the only way a problem can be solved is if you present a solution. If you just articulate the problem very well, then I think the likelihood of the solution coming is very difficult. I would say engagement at various levels is very good, whether it's in the concerned ministry, whether it's in organizations like NITI, if it's a real serious issue, even with the PMO. I would say the government is encouraging, open, receptive, but it is the expectation of what can be done is very clear. I would say also, because a lot of the ministers in the current government have been there for a long time, I think their knowledge of the subject is pretty strong, and their rationale for why a certain thing there, why is a certain thing there, why is a certain thing there is very clear. So, if you have to go and present to them, I think as an industry body or as an individual organization, I think you have to be very well prepared. And I would say finally that the government doesn't like to deal with specific issues. They want to deal much more with industry related issues that they want to solve for.
Mr. Memani, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
No, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.